We asked Jimmy over today because he's a racing man himself. A real one, not a crazy one.
James Dean's Porsche 550. Spider was supposed to be cursed. People called it superstition until the evidence started piling up. After Dean's death, the car was sold for parts. Every single piece caused accidents. The engine killed one man and nearly killed another. The tires exploded simultaneously. Even storing the car was dangerous. A garage caught fire, but the Porsche barely burned. In 1960, the entire wreck vanished while being transported. The truck driver and the car were never seen again. Recently discovered documents prove what really happened. The curse was real, and it can be traced. On a cold February morning in 1931, just as the clock hit 2 a.m., James Byron Dean was born inside the Seven Gables apartment house in Marion, Indiana. He weighed exactly 8 pounds and 10 ounces. The doctor's bill was $15. His mother, Mildred, had big black eyes that people said hinted at Native American ancestry. She named her only child Byron after her favorite poet, Lord Byron. His father, Winton, worked as a dental technician at the VA hospital. They lived in a small apartment right across from the train station, the same one Jimmy would later leave from, alone, grieving, clutching a train cup in one hand and heartbreak in the other. When Jimmy was 4, Winton got a permanent job offer at the Sawtell VA hospital in Los Angeles, so the family left Indiana and moved into a cramped apartment on 6th Street in Santa Monica. Mildred hated the artificial world of California. She missed the simplicity of home. She also noticed how lonely Jimmy was. He was small and pale, and other kids mocked his violin lessons and even his middle name, Byron. Winton stayed quiet most of the time. He barely spoke. He felt distant, like a shadow instead of a father. Mildred saw how badly her son needed something more. So she created a world just for him. She taught him how to play violin when he was 4. She bought him tap shoes. She built a cardboard puppet theater where they made up plays and read poems. She gave him piano lessons and bongo drums and radio scripts to mimic. It became their secret world, just the two of them. Neighbors thought he looked too soft for a boy, too delicate. But Mildred didn't care. She told Jimmy he was special, and he believed her. That belief lit something inside him, a spark that would grow brighter than anyone could imagine. But he never learned how to let go. In May 1940, Mildred felt a sharp pain in her chest. Doctors said it was uterine cancer. She was only 29. Jimmy was 9. He watched her suffer day after day until July 14th, when she finally died. Winton didn't know what to do. Medical bills had buried them. His mother, Emma, came out from Indiana and asked Winton what would happen to the boy. Winton simply said, "I don't want to raise the child." So just 2 days after his mother's death, Jimmy boarded the Challenger train with her coffin. The train stopped across 2,000 miles, and at every stop, he jumped out to check if her casket was still there. He was terrified of losing her again. The conductor gave him a little souvenir, a monogrammed cup and saucer from the Challenger. Jimmy kept it for the rest of his life. On July 20th, 1940, Mildred was buried in Indiana. Winton never came. Jimmy moved into a farmhouse with his aunt and uncle, Hortense and Marcus Winslow, in Fairmount. They gave him their own bedroom because he liked the furniture. He got a pony for his 10th birthday. He hunted rats in the barn with his cousin. He read books about bullfighting and spent hours alone. His father remarried in California and never really looked back. Jimmy never stopped waiting for a letter that rarely came. In 1942, Jimmy met Reverend James DeWeerd. He was a preacher, a war veteran, and at first seemed kind. He taught Jimmy about poetry, gave him books, showed him bullfighting films, but something dark was hidden behind the sermons and gifts. In 1955, while filming Giant, Jimmy finally told Elizabeth Taylor the truth. When he was 11, after his mother died, the Reverend had started molesting him. Elizabeth kept that secret until her death in 2011. Jimmy had carried it for 14 years. He said it hurt him deeply. That pain never left. By the time Jimmy reached his senior year at Fairmount High, DeWeird had become more than a mentor. They took trips to Indianapolis together. They stayed in hotel rooms. The Reverend gave him rides and introduced him to the theater. He also kept control. Jimmy made a sculpture during that time called Self. It was a boy with his head down, hands covering his face, silent, ashamed. He still played basketball and acted in school plays. In 1949, he led the basketball team in scoring during the sectionals. He won the top athlete medal and also placed first at the state drama competition. He was crowned at both ends, sports and art, but inside, he was falling apart. He smashed glasses during games. He exploded in rehearsals. He once got expelled for punching a student who laughed at his dramatic reading. He raced motorcycles lying flat on the seat, sounding like a rocket down narrow Indiana roads. He didn't want control. He wanted escape. When he graduated on May 16, 1949, Jimmy was 18. He ranked 20th in a class of 47. He gave the benediction at the ceremony, but his journal pages were getting darker. Lines about betrayal, shame, confusion. At prom, he went alone. A few days later, he packed his brown suitcase with his diploma, medals, and his journals, and boarded a train headed west. Hollywood was his only way out. By June 1949, he was back in California, living in a tiny Santa Monica apartment with his dog, Max. He told his father he'd study law. He enrolled at Santa Monica City College, but his heart wasn't in it. He switched to theater. At auditions, producers stared at him like meat. Some made offers, most didn't. The city felt rotten. By fall 1950, he got into UCLA and joined the Sigma Newhouse on Gailey Avenue. He landed the role of Malcolm in Macbeth. At Royce Hall, 1,600 people watched him perform. Tickets were $120. His method acting shook everyone. One day, during rehearsal, he threw himself to the floor, screaming. The cast thought he'd lost his mind. He dropped out of UCLA after one semester. He was broke. A friend helped him get a valet job at a lot near CBS. That's where he met Rogers Brackett, a powerful radio director. Brackett offered Jimmy a place to live, a few radio roles, and protection from the streets. But there was a price. Jimmy moved in and entered another twisted relationship. Brackett wanted more than friendship. Jimmy once told a friend he felt like a whore, dancing for rich men who didn't care who he really was. He fled to New York in October 1951 with almost no money. He crashed on couches, ate garbage, got fired from a game show job because he was too good at the stunts. Finally, he found a tiny maid's room at 19 West 68th Street. It had no kitchen, just 2 porthole windows and a hot plate. In December 1953, he auditioned for The Immoralist, a stage play about a seductive Arab boy. Jimmy got the part. On February 8, 1954, his 23rd birthday, the show opened at the Royale Theater. The critics couldn't stop talking about him, but the old trauma didn't go away. In 1952, before his New York run, he had been offered a bit part in Sailor Beware. One line, another in Fixed Bayonets, was cut entirely. Around then, a powerful director invited him to a private meeting. What happened there echoed what had happened with Brackett. Jimmy felt violated. He told his friend William Bast that it made him feel cheap, worthless, so he started racing. Not just for fun, for survival. He raced motorcycles through Los Angeles streets, fast, loud, furious. When he made it big, he bought a $4,000 Porsche Speedster and said racing was his new passion. In March 1954, James Dean walked into Elia Kazan's office 90 minutes late for the East of Eden audition. He wore a beat-up leather jacket and didn't care that the Warner Brothers team was waiting. He mumbled the lines, didn't stand where he was supposed to, and gave no charm. But Kazan saw something in him. He said Dean's eyes carried a kind of loneliness that felt real. It was the same loneliness Kazan wanted for Cal Trask. That same day, Dean was offered the role with a $10,000 contract. It was a low number for a lead, but Dean didn't argue. Kazan ignored Paul Newman, who had auditioned earlier, and chose the unknown. Studio executives didn't get it. Dean had only done one film role before and a few TV parts, but Kazan didn't care. He had made up his mind, and everything changed after that. When they started filming East of Eden in early 1955, Dean showed up with something no one was used to: complete emotional chaos. He didn't just act, he became. And that made people uncomfortable, especially Raymond Massey, the older actor playing Dean's father. Massey was traditional, trained, calm. Dean ignored him on purpose, wouldn't rehearse with him, wouldn't speak to him between takes, just sat in a corner, staring at the floor or scribbling in a notebook. Massey started to hate him. Dean didn't care. During one key scene, Dean suddenly grabbed Massey by the shoulders, even though it wasn't scripted. Massey was shocked. Kazan let it happen. He said the real anger made the scene better. Crew members said it felt like walking on eggshells. Dean would isolate himself completely, talking only to Kazan, barely eating, disappearing for hours, sometimes showing up in the afternoon for a morning shoot. 1 week alone, he cost the film $15,000 in delays. But when the footage came back, it was magic. Dean's bond with Julie Harris, who played Abra, was complicated. They weren't lovers. She was older, married, and patient with him. But Dean was unpredictable. He'd call her at 3 a.m. to talk about the script. During one scene, he suddenly grabbed her face too hard. It startled her, but she forgave him. She said he was desperate to be real. He told her things he didn't tell others: his fears, his confusion, even his sexuality. But no one could fully reach him. He was alone, even in conversation. When East of Eden premiered on April 10, 1955, it made $5 million. Warner Brothers was shocked. It became their fifth highest-grossing film that year. Dean got nominated for an Oscar, the first actor ever nominated posthumously. Because by the time the awards came, he was already dead. Dean's next film was Rebel Without a Cause. Director Nicholas Ray cast him as Jim Stark, the lost teenager. From the start, Ray was obsessed. He told the crew it was like a spiritual marriage. He didn't hide that he was fascinated by Dean's sexuality. Their script sessions turned into long, personal interviews where Ray pushed Dean to bleed emotionally into the role. Dean started feeling trapped. Ray didn't want an actor. He wanted Dean's soul. And Dean began to hate it. During the Griffith Observatory scenes in May 1955, Dean wore a bright red windbreaker. It wasn't just a costume. It became a symbol. He taunted the extras, called them fake rebels, and started a fight that left him with a black eye. Instead of covering it, Ray left it in the film. He said it looked real. Dean agreed. He kept the jacket after filming ended and never gave it back. But it got worse. Just a few days into filming, Dean vanished. He didn't call, didn't show up. Warner Brothers sent out an alert. Ray called his apartment but got nothing. The studio considered replacing him with Tab Hunter. Dean had run away to breathe. He finally called screenwriter Stuart Stern and said he was scared Ray would swallow him whole. After long talks, he came back. But the tension never left. The knife fight with Corey Allen was supposed to be fake, but both actors used real switchblades. One wrong move, and Allen slashed Dean's ear. Blood ran down his neck. Ray yelled, "Cut!" Dean screamed back, "Don't you ever cut while I'm feeling something real." They kept rolling. The switchblade from that scene later sold for $12,000. Dean's life was spiraling. He watched things on set that disgusted him. Director Nicholas Ray, age 43, was having an affair with 16-year-old Natalie Wood. So was Dennis Hopper. Dean mocked it quietly, calling it Hollywood's secret, telling his roommate William Bast that it made him sick. Meanwhile, the studio sent memos warning they couldn't imply anything homosexual between Dean's character and Plato, but Sal Mineo later admitted he played Plato as the first openly gay teen in film. Dean moved on to Giant. On that Texas set in June 1955, he drove his silver Porsche 356 Speedster like a weapon. One day, he came speeding toward Elizabeth Taylor at 70 Manipaitampi and braked just 15 feet from her. She collapsed, shaking. George Stevens, the director, banned Dean's car from the location. Dean argued. He said driving relaxed him. Stevens said it was a death wish. The next night, Dean broke into the lot at 11 p.m., hot-wired a Ford crew truck, and crashed it into a wooden fence at 100 meters, destroying $3,500 in props. When Stevens arrived, Dean stood in the dust and said, "Your fake Texas needed some real damage." Warner Brothers docked $4,200 from his $17,500 salary, but they couldn't fire him. Too much of the film still needed him. Dean's behavior only got worse. On June 18, 1955, in front of 120 local extras, he walked up to the crowd and urinated on the ground without breaking eye contact. Elizabeth Taylor covered her face. Rock Hudson cursed. Dean went back to his mark and nailed the scene in one take. Stevens kept it. Warner Brothers had to pay $50 to every offended extra and send apologies. On July 2nd, Dean and Hudson got into a bar fight. Dean made a comment about Hudson's relationship with his agent. Hudson grabbed him. Dean headbutted Hudson in the mouth. 4 stitches. Filming stopped for 2 days. Taylor had a panic attack so bad she needed medication. Hudson never forgave him. He didn't go to the funeral. Stevens knew something was coming. After one scene in August, he told an assistant, "He'll die in some stupid accident before the film comes out." Behind the scenes, the pain ran deeper. In 1951, Dean had lived with Rogers Brackett, a rich radio producer who helped him survive. Their relationship blurred lines: money, favors, power. Dean moved in, but later said he felt owned. In 1955, Brackett reappeared and demanded $800. Warner Brothers paid him to stay quiet. Dean had lived at the Warner lot in his dressing room. He kept a Colt .45 there and called it his sanctuary. When the gun went missing, he lost it. When they barred him from sleeping there, he retaliated by stealing door plaques and hanging them from fountains. Then he rode off on his bike, saying he'd never work for Warner again. The only person who truly saw him was Elizabeth Taylor. On the Giant set, they stayed up until 3 a.m. talking. One night, Dean told her something he had never said aloud. When he was 11, after his mother died, his childhood minister, Reverend James DeWeird, sexually abused him. Taylor said it haunted him. After that night, Dean couldn't even look her in the eye. Days of silence would pass before he spoke again. But he kept coming back. She listened. She kept the secret until her death. In mid-September 1955, James Dean stood in front of a camera and told America to slow down. He looked calm, maybe a little serious, and warned, "Take it easy driving. The life you save might be mine." It was just a public safety clip, something short, something simple. But not even 2 weeks later, on September 30th, That sentence stopped being advice. It became a haunting echo. Dean died that day in a violent crash at just 24 years old. The PSA aired after his death, and suddenly it didn't feel like a warning anymore. It felt like a prophecy. Only 13 days before the crash, Dean had filmed that message. And a week before it happened, something strange had already started. On the night of September 23rd, Alec Guinness was trying to find a restaurant in Los Angeles. He and his friend Thelma Moss had been turned away from 3 places because Moss was wearing trousers, which some restaurants still didn't allow for women. Finally, they reached Villa Capri. Dean was there and invited them to join him. Before dinner, Dean rushed them outside, excited to show his brand-new silver Porsche 550 Spider. He had just bought it that day. It was sleek, low to the ground, and fast. He said it could reach 150 miles an hour. But Guinness, exhausted and irritated, felt something cold tighten around him. As if someone else was speaking through him, he looked at Dean and said, "Please, never get in it. If you get in that car, you will be found dead in it by this time next week." Dean laughed it off. He smiled and said, "Oh, shucks, don't be so mean." 7 days later, Guinness's voice would echo forever. James Dean was reckless, but it wasn't all thrill-seeking. Something about racing made him feel alive. Director George Stevens didn't like that. During the filming of Giant in Marfa, Texas, Stevens grew nervous. So nervous that he added a special clause into Dean's contract, banning any kind of racing until the shoot was finished. It wasn't just legal caution. Stevens told people he had a disturbing dream about Dean in a silver death machine. The description matched the Porsche exactly. Even when Dean's car was delivered on September 27th, his last day filming, Stevens warned him again. So did the crew. "You're going to kill somebody," they said. Dean didn't listen. He smiled, ignored the words, and climbed in. On the morning of September 30th, Dean left for Salinas with his mechanic Rolf Wutherich. Bill Hickman followed behind them in a Ford station wagon with photographer Sanford Roth. At 3:30 p.m., just south of Bakersfield, a patrolman pulled both cars over. Dean got a ticket for going 65 in a 55 zone. Hickman got one too, 20 miles over the limit while towing a trailer. Afterward, Hickman warned Dean again. He said the Porsche was nearly invisible on the gray highway. From behind, he could barely see it. Dean brushed him off, got back in, and kept going. Just before 5:01 p.m., Dean and Wutherich stopped at Blackwell's corner gas station. Dean had an apple and a Coke. He ran into racers Lance Reventlow and Bruce Kessler, who also mentioned they'd gotten tickets that day. It was the third warning in just a few hours. Wutherich asked Dean to let him drive, but Dean said no. As they got ready to leave, someone remembered Dean saying, "This could be my last race." No one thought much of it at the time, but at 5:15 p.m., Dean pulled away. At 5:45 p.m., he was dead. The Porsche hit a black and white 1950 Ford Tudor, driven by 23-year-old Donald Turnipseed. It happened at the junction of Route 466 and Route 41 near Cholame, California. Turnipseed turned left across Dean's path. Dean tried to swerve with a sidestep move, but there wasn't enough time. The Porsche hit the Ford almost head-on and flipped through the air 2 or 3 times, landing in a ditch. The Ford skidded nearly 40 feet from the force. Dean's left foot was crushed between the clutch and brake pedals. The small car had taken the full impact. It folded around him. His injuries were massive. A broken neck, shattered jaw, both arms broken, and deep internal damage. His foot was mangled, his chest crushed. Patrolman Ronald Nelson saw him being lifted into an ambulance about 10 minutes later. Wutherich had been thrown clear. He was unconscious, with a broken jaw, broken hip, and shattered femur. They were taken together to Paso Robles War Memorial Hospital, 28 miles away. Dean was declared dead at 6:20 p.m. by Dr. Robert Bossert. Some say he died in the arms of Bill Hickman, who arrived shortly after the crash. Turnipseed survived with only bruises and a bloodied nose. He hitchhiked home in the dark. At the inquest on October 11th, he said he never saw the low silver car until it was too late. The jury ruled accidental death. He wasn't charged, but he never got past it. He gave only one interview, then stayed silent for life. He ran a family business until he died of lung cancer in 1995 at age 63. The news reached Hollywood that same night. Elizabeth Taylor was watching film reels of Giant when director George Stevens turned off the projector and said, "Dean is dead." At first, no one believed him. Taylor collapsed. She was hospitalized. Rock Hudson cried. Dean's funeral was held on October 8th at Fairmount Friends Church in Indiana. The coffin stayed closed. His face and torso were too damaged. 600 mourners sat inside. Over 2,400 stood outside, silent. The wrecked Porsche was declared totaled, but George Barris bought it for $2,500. That's when the curse began. At his shop, it fell off the trailer and broke a mechanic's leg. Barris sold the engine and transmission. Dr. Troy McHenry used Dean's rear suspension in his own car. On October 21, 1956, during a race in Pomona, McHenry's car spun off the track and slammed into a tree. He died instantly. Another doctor, William Eschrick, used Dean's engine in his Lotus. That same race, his car flipped violently. He survived but was badly injured. Both crashes happened within hours of each other. 2 of Dean's tires were sold. Both exploded at once on the buyer's car, causing another crash. A garage storing the car for a safety exhibit caught fire. The Porsche barely burned. In 1960, while it was being moved from Miami, the car disappeared. The truck and the wreck were never found. One strange night in 1959, a fire broke out at 3158 Hamilton Avenue in Fresno, where the car was being stored. Flames tore through the building, but the Porsche barely took damage. Just 2 tires scorched. No one knew why it survived so easily. George Barris later said, "It proved the curse was real." Dr. McHenry's crash remained the only confirmed death caused by Dean's parts. After that, his widow gave away what was left to racers around the country. Eschrick, though nearly killed, kept racing and said he wasn't superstitious. But years later, he admitted the car felt like it had betrayed him. In 2020, a Porsche expert named Don Ahern found the original transaxle in a crate, stored for 30 years. Historian Lee Raskin confirmed it was real. In 2021, it sold for $387,000. Some stories were invented. George Barris wrote about a teenager getting crushed and a trucker being killed by the car falling on him. But no records backed that up. What was real was already strange enough. A silver car, a warning on camera, a voice from Alec Guinness, a dream from a director, and a string of crashes that followed a single moment on a California highway.